I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It started in the most ordinary place in the world, the laundromat on Willow Street. The kind with humming machines, a faint detergent smell, and a wall clock that always ran a minute slow. I used to go late, mostly because no one else did. Quiet suited me too well back then. It kept me from thinking about the half-written messages sitting in my drafts folder. That night, I was loading clothes when I heard someone behind me say, "This one eats socks. Third machine from the left. Avoid it if you value your pairs." I turned, and there she was, my friend Daniel's mom, Maya. Mid-40s, hair tied in one of those loose knots that looked like it could fall apart with a single breath. She had a basket tucked against her hip and a half-tired smile, like she'd been up before the sun. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, a little too quickly. She shrugged. "Life happens. Dryer at home died. Figured I'd surrender." I watched her set her basket down. Small things caught my attention. The way she pressed a thumb against her ring finger, like she was checking for a jewelry ghost that wasn't there anymore. The way she nudged her sleeve up only halfway, then let it fall again. She remembered my name without pause. "How's school going, Erin?" "Good," I said, though it wasn't. "Long." She laughed softly, folding a towel once, then again, much slower the second time. "Everything feels long at your age. You'll look back and think none of it mattered as much as you thought." The place was almost empty, just the machines and one flickering ceiling light. She glanced at it, then at me, then let her gaze drift toward my hands. I was gripping a napkin I'd stuffed in my pocket earlier, folding it and unfolding it until it had soft creases like an old map. "You okay?" she asked gently. Not intrusively, just there. "Yeah, just tired." She didn't push, just nodded. I appreciated that more than I should have. We worked in near silence after that. I caught her eyes a few times. She'd flick away, then look back a second too soon, like she didn't want me to think she was avoiding me. She remembered my coffee preference, too. "Still doing that cheap vanilla ice thing?" she asked as she sorted clothes. I blinked. "You remember that? You spilled one on my deck 2 summers ago," she said, smiling. "Your face went pale like you'd committed a crime." I laughed under my breath. I thought Daniel would never let me hear the end of it. "He didn't," she said, and the smile softened. "But I did." Her dryer beeped then, a sharp sound cutting through the quiet hum. She gathered her things quickly, almost too quickly, like staying longer would start some kind of trouble neither of us had named. As she lifted the basket, her sleeve slipped again, brushing her wrist. I don't know why my eyes lingered there. Maybe because hers flicked to my hands at the same time, and for a moment neither of us moved. "I should go," she said, shifting the basket. "Long day tomorrow." "Right," I said. "Yeah." She hesitated at the door. Just a breath. A pause. Then, "Good seeing you, Erin." I nodded, pretending I didn't feel something shift under my ribs. When I finished my load and walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Don't tell Daniel you saw me there tonight." Nothing else. No explanation. Just that. And somehow, her silence said more than the words ever could. I told myself I wouldn't read too deeply into her message. But I kept checking it anyway, like maybe another text would appear and explain why it felt heavier than it looked. A week passed before I saw her again. It was late afternoon, the kind where the sun hovered low and made everything look slightly unfinished. I stopped by Daniel's house to drop off a charger he'd left in my car. He wasn't home. His truck was gone, but the front door was open, screen door latched. I knocked. She answered. She had a mug in her hand, steam drifting out in thin, patient ribbons. Her hair was still damp from a shower, curling slightly near her temples. She looked surprised, then something softer replaced it. "Oh, hey," she said. "Come in, if you're not in a rush." I followed her into the kitchen. It smelled like ginger and something warm I couldn't name. "Daniel's out," she said, setting the mug down. "You can leave the charger on the counter." I did. I should have gone. But she motioned toward the teapot on the stove. "I made too much. Want some?" "Sure," I said, though tea wasn't really my thing. She poured it for me, her sleeves slipping again, that familiar little gesture I'd started recognizing without meaning to. I watched her hands more than the tea. They were steady, practiced, the kind of hands that had done 1,000 small tasks alone. We sat at the small kitchen table, legs almost brushing, but not quite. For a while, neither of us talked. She sipped her tea. I did too, even though it was too hot. She noticed, but didn't tease me. Finally, she said, "You know, I'm not actually embarrassed about the laundromat." I looked up. Then why the text? She breathed out slowly. Because Daniel worries. He thinks I try too hard to keep everything together. He'd overthink it. And I don't want him thinking there's anything he needs to protect me from. Is there? I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked to me, then down to her mug. Not yet. The yet hung there longer than either of us looked at it. She changed the subject, almost clumsily. You used to come here all the time when you were kids. I remember you always leaving your shoes in the doorway. Drove me crazy. Still do, I said. Bad habit. She smiled, but there was something faintly sad underneath it. You all grew up so fast. One day the house was full of noise. The next, she tapped the table lightly. Just me. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small truth she hadn't planned on sharing. I wanted to reach across the table, not to hold her hand, just steady it. Instead, I pressed my palm against my knee, grounding myself. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, I said quietly, surprising myself. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me. Really looked, like she was sorting through a dozen things she wouldn't say. Then she reached out and brushed a crumb off my sleeve. Just that. A tiny gesture, barely a touch. But her fingers lingered an extra half-second. And that said everything. For a few days after the kitchen tea moment, I kept waiting for something. A text, a sign, even a passing glance that would clarify what we were doing. Nothing came. And that silence, it did things. Made me replay her touch on my sleeve like it meant more than it should. Made me wonder if she regretted it the second I walked out. I tried pretending it didn't matter. Failed. The next time I saw her was at Daniel's garage. He had asked me to help move some old furniture into storage. And when I showed up, she was already in the driveway, sorting boxes in the trunk of her car. She looked up, paused a too long pause, then smiled, like she had to remember how. Hey, she said. Hey. Daniel came out before anything else could be said, tossing me a pair of gloves. Perfect timing, man. We've got like 6 of these to move. We lifted the first dresser together. He didn't notice her watching us, or the way she looked away the second his eyes turned in her direction. The whole time, I kept catching glimpses of her, leaning against the hood of her car, arms crossed, thumb rubbing the inside of her wrist like she was calming something down. At one point, Daniel went inside to get packing tape, leaving the two of us alone in the garage doorway. She stepped forward, brushing some dust off a shelf. You've been quiet lately, she said, not turning. You too. She exhaled, a soft, unsure sound. I figured it was better that way. Better for who? Her hand froze on the shelf. She didn't answer. I took a tiny step closer, not enough to be obvious, just enough. She noticed anyway. Her shoulders tensed the way people do when they want to step forward but talk themselves out of it. Aaron, she murmured, I don't want to make anything harder for you. For me, I said, a little too fast. You're 20, she said. You think you know what you want, but I do. She finally looked at me. Her eyes flicked down to my mouth, then back up. Not imagination. It was too quick, too unguarded. But before anything could settle, Daniel burst back out of the house, all noise and movement. Found it, he shouted, holding tape like a trophy. She stepped back so sharply her shoe scraped the concrete. He didn't notice. We kept working. She disappeared inside at some point, saying something about checking laundry. I knew she was avoiding the way the air had shifted. When we finished, Daniel went to return a tool to the neighbor, leaving the garage quiet again. She reappeared, wiping her hands on a towel. You should go, she said softly, though I hadn't said anything. Do you really want me to? Her breath hitched, barely, but enough. She stepped closer, then stopped. Her fingers brushed the side of my hand, not holding, just testing the space between us. Aaron, she whispered, my name breaking a little at the end. I leaned in, not touching, just close enough to feel her inhale, just close enough that a kiss was right there. And she whispered, almost against my mouth, don't. But the way she said it felt nothing like no. Tea happened on an evening that shouldn't have mattered. A simple walk, nothing planned. I dropped by Daniel's to return a drill, and she was outside watering the small row of plants by the porch. The hose made a soft arc, catching the last bit of light. She looked tired. Not physically. More like someone carrying a thought they couldn't put down anywhere. Daniel ran to the store, she said. You can leave it by the door. I'm not in a rush, I said. She hesitated, then nodded toward the sidewalk. Walk with me, just to the corner and back. We fell into step quietly. A little distance between us, like we couldn't decide if closing it would be too obvious. Halfway down the street, she asked, Have you been spending more time with that girl? What's her name? The one from your class. The question landed strangely. Casual tone, but her eyes didn't match. Lena, I said. Not really. Oh. She looked forward again. Just that. One syllable, but something tightened inside it. You okay? I asked. She let the silence stretch. Too long. Long enough that I almost took the question back. I'm not, she exhaled, starting over. I'm not proud of how that made me feel. What? Jealous, she said, barely audible. Which I have no right to be. We stopped walking at the same time, though I couldn't tell who stopped first. She stared at a crack in the pavement like it might offer an escape. I'm old enough to know better, she murmured. I shouldn't react. Not to you. Not like that. I stepped closer, slow enough that she could move away if she wanted. She didn't. You don't have to pretend you don't care, I said. My voice came out softer than I meant. I'm not pretending, she whispered. That's the problem. Her hand lifted, not reaching for me, just hovering near her own collarbone, like she was holding herself together. I almost touched her wrist. Almost. You keep looking at me like you want something, she said, eyes flicking to mine. And I keep looking back, even when I shouldn't. Her breath shook. Mine did too. I don't know what to do with this, she continued. With you. With the way everything feels like it's slipping out of my hands. The confession cracked something open between us. The quiet around us sharpened, the kind of silence that makes the world feel like it's waiting. You're not losing control, I said. She laughed once, short and humorless. Are not. I didn't answer. I couldn't. We were too close now. Close enough to see the small crease near her eye, the one that only appeared when she was trying not to cry. Aaron, she said, voice barely a thread. If I let this become real, I don't know who I'd be after. A pause. A long one. Long enough to feel like a choice. I leaned in, not touching, just close enough that her breath brushed my cheek. Maya, I whispered. What do you want me to do? She closed her eyes. A small tremor moved through her. Then she opened them, gaze unsteady, and asked the quietest question of the night. One that stopped just short of breaking us. What happens if we don't walk away right now? The day after that walk, everything changed, not in a loud way, but in that subtle, unmistakable shift you only notice when someone decides to step back. She stopped appearing at the usual times. No porch lights left on. No kitchen window glow. No accidental overlaps. I told myself it was coincidence. That she was busy. That I was imagining the distance. But the truth was simpler. She was pulling away. Daniel didn't mention anything, but he acted different, too. Less casual. More watchful. Once, when I stopped by, he stepped outside and closed the door behind him like he didn't want me looking in. Mom's been tired lately, he said. Working too much. Just giving her space. A harmless explanation. Except the way he said space felt pointed. As if he knew something he wasn't supposed to. Or sensed something he couldn't name. For the first time, I wondered if she'd said something to him. Or if he simply noticed the way I kept glancing toward the hallway, waiting for her to appear. I tried checking in once, a simple text. Hey, everything okay? I watched the typing bubble appear. Disappear. Reappear. Disappear again. She never sent anything. So I stayed away for 3 days. No reason. Just didn't want to make things harder. On the 4th night, I saw her by accident. She was outside by the curb, placing a box into the trunk of her car. Books, maybe. Or old clothes. She worked quietly, shoulders slightly hunched. When she turned and saw me across the street, her face went still, not shocked, not angry. Just unreadable. A practiced expression, like someone slipping back into an old version of themselves. I crossed the street slowly. She didn't move until I was a few steps away. "Hey," I said. She swallowed. "You shouldn't be here right now." Did I do something? No, too quick. Then softer. "Not you." Then what? She closed the trunk carefully, fingertips lingering on the edge. "My ex called," she said. "Out of nowhere. Said he's thinking of visiting. Checking on things." She gave a small laugh with no humor in it. "Whatever that means." My stomach tightened. "Do you want him to?" "That's not the point." "Then what is?" She pressed her hand to her forehead, as if the right word might be hiding behind it. "I don't want complications," she whispered. "Not with him. Not with Daniel. Not with you." The "you" landed differently, like it had weight she wished she could take back. "So you're avoiding me," I said quietly. "I'm trying to protect the things I can still protect." I wanted to ask what that meant. I wanted to tell her to stop shutting me out. Instead, I nodded, a small, helpless gesture that felt like surrender. A car passed behind us, headlights sweeping over her face. She stepped back slightly, as if remembering where we were. Who we were? "I should go," she said. "Yeah," I murmured. "Me too." She reached for her keys, then hesitated, just long enough to almost speak. But whatever she wanted to say stayed behind her closed lips. When I got home, I typed a message. "Tell me if you want this to stop." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late, close to midnight. I drove by Daniel's house without thinking, the way people sometimes drive past somewhere familiar just to feel less alone. Her porch light was off, but a faint glow spilled from the kitchen window. I told myself I'd keep driving. I didn't. I parked, walked up the quiet path, stopped at the doorstep, hand hovering before I could knock. Before I touched the door, it opened. She stood there in a loose sweater, hair down, eyes tired in the way someone looks after replaying a conversation they never actually had. "Aaron," she whispered, like she'd been expecting something but not me. "I shouldn't be here," I said. "I know." She stepped aside anyway. "Come in." The kitchen felt smaller than usual, like the walls were listening. A single lamp lit the table, and a half-finished cup of tea sat in front of the chair across from her. I don't know if it was for her, or if she'd poured it imagining someone else sitting there. We didn't sit at first. We hovered, both of us waiting for the other to break whatever this fragile thing was. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" "For disappearing." Her fingers curled around the edge of the counter. "For thinking distance would make it easier. For thinking I could just turn off everything." I took a slow breath. "You don't have to apologize." "Yes," she murmured. "I do." There was a long silence. She looked at her hands like the truth might be hiding in the lines of her palms. "My ex isn't coming," she said. "He changed his mind. Or maybe he never really planned on showing up." I nodded, not sure what that meant for us. "But when he called," she continued, "I panicked. Not because of him. Because I realized how close I'd let you get. How much it would hurt if this." She gestured between us, small, almost embarrassed. Blew up in my face. Her voice broke just slightly on the last words. "Maya," I said gently, "you don't have to pretend you don't care." She gave a quiet laugh. "I'm not pretending. That's the problem." I stepped closer. Not too much. Just enough that she could walk away if she wanted. She didn't. "I didn't come here to push," I said. "I just didn't want things to end in silence." She looked up at me then, really looked, and something in her expression finally stopped hiding. "Do you want this?" she asked, voice barely above a breath. Not dramatic. Not pleading. Just honest. "Yes," I said. No hesitation. She closed her eyes, like letting herself hear it was harder than the words themselves. When she opened them again, they were softer, braver. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know." I lifted my hand, slow enough that she could move. She didn't. Her fingers met mine halfway. A small, trembling touch, nothing more. But it felt like the beginning of something real. Something chosen. She let out a shaky exhale. "Okay." Just that. Quiet, human, real. Her thumb brushed the back of my hand. A simple connection, nothing irreversible. But enough. Enough to say we weren't walking away. Time didn't fix everything. It never does. But it softened the edges. Weeks passed in that slow, almost imperceptible way where change doesn't announce itself. It just appears, like sunlight moving across a room. Their routines shifted not by decision, but by quiet gravity. He started walking the long way to work, passing the park without meaning to. She started waking a bit earlier, brewing her tea with a steadier hand. They didn't plan anything, didn't set a schedule, didn't promise. Yet somehow, most mornings around 8:47 a.m., they ended up on the same bench again. Not every day, just enough. She still drank tea. He still had his black coffee. The world kept running around them. Joggers passing, bicycles clicking over pavement, birds loud in the trees. But something between them had settled into a calm they didn't need to name. Some mornings they talked. Some mornings they didn't. Both situations felt right. He'd glance at her hand resting next to his, not touching, just there. She would brush a strand of hair behind her ear, not to look pretty, but because she had always done that when she felt comfortable. These tiny things, once unnoticed, now felt like the quiet proof of something earned, not claimed. Life didn't magically smooth out. Her job was still stressful. His family still pulled him in 10 different directions. Some days they arrived at the bench looking worn down, carrying the weight of whatever the week had thrown at them. But they shared it differently now. One cold morning, she brought him an extra tea biscuit by accident. He didn't believe her, but he smiled like he did. Another day, he handed her a pair of simple black gloves he said he happened to have an extra of. She didn't believe him either, but she wore them. There was no confession, no cinematic kiss, no swelling music, just two people choosing not to walk away anymore. As time went on, the moments stretched naturally. A slightly longer conversation, a shared walk halfway to her place, a call on a night when silence felt heavier than usual. Little things, quiet things, human things. And eventually, without needing to say it, they began ending their days the way they had started them, in the same place. One evening, long after the sun had dipped behind the houses, he walked her home. Not for the first time, but with a softer intention. When they reached her door, she rested her forehead against it, tired. He waited, patient. She turned, looked at him with that familiar half-smile. The one he had learned meant "I'm okay. Just tired, stay anyway." He didn't step closer. She didn't pull back. They just stood there, breathing the same cool air, letting the simple truth settle between them. They weren't alone anymore. Later, months later, sitting on their bench with tea and black coffee, she nudged his shoulder lightly and said, "Do you remember the first time you sat here?" He nodded. "I remember you didn't look at me," he said softly. She laughed. Warm, quiet, genuine. "I was waiting for you to speak first." He looked at her, really looked, and something passed between them that didn't need words, didn't need promises, didn't need anything grand. Just understanding. Just them. And that, finally, was enough.